Okay, here we are. Welcome to the Raspberry Pi Digital Making at Home live stream for another week, everybody. I'm here with my sidekick, partner in crime, Agent Z. How's it going, man? You good?
Yeah.
Yeah, keen to be on the live stream again this week?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing our Keep It Secret theme this week. So with that in mind, we're going to be talking a little bit about cryptography and the famous Bletchley Park this week. We've got a really, really famous and exciting guest with us this week. It's pretty cool having Dr. Black on us, isn't it? Yeah, so we've got Professor Sue Black. She's at Durham University. She's a professor of computer science and a technology evangelist, which is an amazingly cool job title. She's a recipient of the John Ivinson Award, which is really amazing. She's the founder of Tech Mums BCS Women for the British Computer Sciences Society, and she also co-wrote the book Saving Bletchley Park, which is an amazing book. So I recommend, if you haven't read that book, that you go out and grab hold of it, because it's a really cool story. And it's a really amazing thing that they've done, that body of work to save Bletchley Park, which we'll talk about in just a little minute. How did you go with our coding projects this week? Our Keep It Secret? Pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah? Are you ready to do the Caesar cipher one we're going to do a bit later on, where we can decode some secret messages? Yeah? It's pretty cool. We've been talking about secrets and spies and things, haven't we? Been watching the Jason Bourne movies and things, because you like a bit of spy story. Should we get Professor Black on and have a chat to her about Bletchley Park and all the really cool code-breaking stuff they did in the Second World War?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Professor Black, are you there?
Hi. Hi.
Hey.
I like the Jason Bourne movies too. So watched them over a few times.
We were just discussing that earlier. Do you prefer James Bond or Jason Bourne?
Jason Bourne, definitely.
What did you say? Do you like Bond or Bourne better?
Born.
Bourne, yeah, you're a Bourne man.
Yeah.
I'm a Bond man. But I grew up with those movies as a kid, right? So, you know.
So did I, but I've switched over now.
Nice. Jason Bourne is pretty amazing. I do like those spy movies. There's quite a bit of code breaking in there. That's really cool. And we watched. What was the other one we watched recently that you liked as well with spies? Red.
Yeah.
You like that too, didn't you? That's based on a really cool comic book. That's awesome. So it's really great to have you on, Professor Black. Thanks for coming along. It's a rare opportunity to get to speak to you.
Oh, thanks very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. I mean, you've done so much stuff. Like, you are a role model. I know that my partner Kat, you're a personal hero of hers for a lot of the work that you've done with BCS women and tech mums and stuff like that. She sort of follows both of those things, and she's really excited about that sort of gender equality thing in tech.
Great.
And so yeah, it's amazing the amount of work you've done. I just want to get that out of the way so I can gush at you a little bit, and then we can talk about the stuff that you've been doing. So that's really cool. I mean, you wrote that book, Saving Bletchley Park, which I read and loved, and I know for a fact that it was the fastest funded book on Kickstarter ever. Is that right?
The fastest crowdfunded book ever at the time, not now, right? It took us 4 days, and I think at that time the record was like a few weeks.
That's
so
amazing.
Yeah.
What do you think it was that caused the sort of the desire for that book so quickly? What was it that gave you that groundswell to get it going?
Well, I think because I ran the campaign from 2008 to 2011 to save Bletchley Park, and after running that campaign, so many people said to me, well, like, what did you do? How did you run the campaign? What happened? And I think it was very early use of Twitter, because we started using Twitter at the end of 2008 when it was still reasonably new. And lots of people said it was the first instance of using social media in that kind of way, in a kind of a campaigning way, to save historical sites. And so many people asked me over the years after the end of the campaign, like, what did you do? That I just thought, well, why don't I just write a book, and then I can just say, buy my book. So I've got, here's a copy here.
And it worked. You saved Bletchley, right? Like, you guys did it. You managed to save Bletchley
Park.
Park.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, like, the first time I went to Bletchley Park, I think was 2003. So quite some time ago now. And the first time I went there, I didn't really know anything much about it. I knew some code breakers worked there. I knew it was during World War II. So like a long time ago. And for some reason, I don't know why, maybe I'd seen something on television, I'm not sure, but I thought it was about 50 old men that worked at Bletchley Park as the code breakers. And so the first time I went there in 2003, I went to a meeting, and then I went for a walk around the site and ended up bumping into these guys that were rebuilding the bomb machine, which is one of the machines that was created during World War II at Bletchley Park to industrialize the code breaking process. So like a machine that kind of could crank through all the possible permutations and combinations so that they could crack the codes more quickly. So I bumped into these guys that were rebuilding this machine, and talked to them about that. And then they asked me why I was there. So I said, I'm here representing this group of women in computing, BCS women. And they said, oh, did you know that more than half the people that worked here were women? So I was like, no, I didn't know that, because I thought it was 50 old men. And I said, how many people worked here? And they said more than 10,000. So I was completely blown away to find out that, in fact, it was about 8,000 women worked at Bletchley Park, and most of them young women as well, sort of between the ages of 18 and 23. So, you know, all of these young people working at Bletchley Park, thousands and thousands of people working there to crack the codes all the way through the Second World War. And then after that, I found out that the work that was done there was said to have shortened World War II by 2 years. And at that time, 11 million people a year were dying. So potentially the work that was done there saved 22 million lives. And I just thought, that is so incredible. Around the same time, I found out that they might have to close. So this was in 2008, because they just didn't have enough money. They didn't have enough people visiting the sites. And I think in a way, they were kind of a victim of their own success, in that Bletchley Park was kept secret for decades after World War II. So most people didn't really know about it at all, because they wanted to keep everything secret, so that no one else around the world found out what had actually happened there. But then it was a victim of its own success, because it was kept so secret that no one really knew of its major contribution to saving 22 million lives. And so that meant that they weren't having many visitors to the site. And the main way that Bletchley Park got money back then was from people visiting and paying on the door to go and look around the museum. So they were struggling financially. And when I heard that, I just thought, I've got to do something to help save Bletchley Park. And so that's what I did then. I was, at that time, I was head of a computer science department at the University of Westminster in London. I emailed all the heads and professors of computing in the country saying, we've got to save Bletchley Park. We got onto BBC News, we got into the Times newspaper, we sent a letter to the Times, and had like quite a big reaction really quickly. But then that kind of quietened down, and I didn't quite know what else to do after that. So it was around the end of 2008 I started using Twitter, and realized quite quickly I could just type Bletchley Park into the search box in Twitter and then find everyone in the world that was already tweeting or talking about Bletchley Park, and then have a conversation with them. And so before Twitter and before social media, there was no way that you could do that. How would you find all those people? So from then started tweeting people, trying to raise awareness, got Stephen Fry involved. That was a major step change. So at the time, Stephen Fry had the most Twitter followers in the UK, which I think was about 60,000, I think, back in early 2009. And so I'd set up a blog telling the story of what we were doing with Bletchley Park in the campaign. And I was getting about 50 hits a day on my blog. When I saw Stephen Fry tweeting, I thought maybe he'll be interested, because I know he loves technology, he loves history. I think he'll be a good person to get on board with the campaign. So I sent him, luckily he was following me on Twitter, I sent him several private messages, direct messages on Twitter, saying, you know, like, please, can you help with the campaign? And the next day he tweeted a link to my blog. So I'd been getting about 50 hits a day. And that day I got 8,000 hits on my blog, and became the most retweeted person in the world on Twitter. So it was kind of a lesson for me. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it really showed me that if you find key influential people that care about the same things that you do, you can have a big impact really quickly. So that was kind of like the first 9 months of the campaign. And then through Twitter, really, we just found hundreds, thousands of people around the world that were interested in and supported Bletchley Park. People ran, you know, one guy ran like a stand-up comedy event to raise funds for Bletchley Park. Someone else walked to Everest Base Camp to raise funds for Bletchley Park. And so we campaigned for about 3 years in the end. And then in 2011, the Heritage Lottery Fund gave Bletchley Park £4.1 million, you know, and then we knew that Bletchley Park was saved.
And was it at that point with the Heritage Lottery money that they began to sort of do the renovations and create the interactive spaces and do all the sorts of things that makes it such an amazing place to visit?
Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah. So before that, so like, you know, when I first went in 2003 and in 2008, it was still a very exciting place to visit, but there wasn't, there just wasn't enough stuff around for people to read. Like all of the interactive stuff wasn't there. Some of the huts were falling down. I don't know if you search for pictures of the huts at Bletchley Park, you know, back in 2008, they looked like they were going to fall down and needed renovating. And yeah, all the money was for exactly that sort of thing, to renovate the huts, to, you know, kind of make it like a modern day museum as well as an amazing historical site.
And it is very much a living museum when you go there. It's amazing that you can feel the vibe of the place, like, because it was a military installation, wasn't it? Like, it was a straight up top secret military installation.
Ministry of Defence, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it was twice the size it is now. So at some point, I think during the 1990s, the people that kind of ran the museum at Bletchley Park decided, because they had no money, the best thing to do would be to sell half the site and keep half the site as the museum. So it was 52 acres, which is massive, right? And so now I think it's about 26. But yeah, so it's just such an exciting place and a great place to visit.
Oh, it's amazing. Who were the original owners of it then? Once it got well, I suppose it was decommissioned as a military site, and then was that a private owner that took it on? And
I think British Telecom had it for some time, and now I think now it's owned by the Bletchley Park Trust. But yeah, BT had it for some time, and they ran it as a kind of a training centre. So through the campaign, I've met various people who are now friends who actually did training courses, like sort of telephone switching and stuff like that at Bletchley Park back in the day. I don't know, like 20 years ago, I think 30 years ago maybe.
Amazing. BT employees going to work out of Bletchley Park.
Like,
yeah, two things together now. Like, that's amazing. Yeah. So you say there were 10,000 people on Bletchley Park site working as code breakers, and 8,000 of those, so 80% of the population there were women at Bletchley Park.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do you think then that I suppose the prevailing ideal of the whole thing was a bunch of crusty old men sitting around smoking pipes? Why do you think that is the way people think about Bletchley Park rather than the actual truth?
Yeah, it's hard to know really, because it seems to be in everyone's, you know, heads before they know that it's actually was quite different. I mean, I think maybe that was the way it was portrayed on TV, maybe in some I don't know, documentaries or I mean, the thing is that when there were some older guys, so, you know, like the people running it, the guy in charge was probably an older man, and some of the code breakers were, you know, they weren't all young. I think Alan Turing was something like 26 years old, I think, when he was there. One of the code breakers, Donald Mickey, was, I think, 16. So, you know, there was a massive variation in age of the people working there. But I think mainly the women working there were mainly very young. Quite a lot were school leavers, you know, at 18 or had just started university, that kind of age.
Yeah. I guess it was that time though, right? Wasn't it? It was needs must, effectively. Like, we need.
Well, exactly, because yeah, most of the men were fighting in the war as soldiers. Yeah, absolutely.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. Did you have a question that you'd like to ask Professor Black?
How hard is it to write Saving Bletchley Park?
How hard was it to write the book? Well, I guess in some ways it was hard, in other ways it was easy. I think because books are such, you know, it's like 60,000 words or something. That's a lot of writing to do. And I think when I first started to write it, I kind of got completely overwhelmed by how much writing that is. And it wasn't really until I chatted to a guy called Justin Pollard, actually, who's one of the founders of Unbound, the publishers of the book. It's just saying to him, you know, like, it's just so overwhelming, I don't know where to start. And he said what he does to kind of like get everything out of his head is like write it all down. So I ended up writing down everything I could think of, all the things that happened on post-it notes, with probably about 150 post-it notes, putting them all over the living room floor, and then trying to put them in chronological order. So I did that. And so then I had a list, and then I put that into a spreadsheet. Then as like kind of the rows, and then in the columns I put things in like any other information related to that thing that happened. So basically I built up this massive spreadsheet, and then from that created a document using software called Scrivener, which is really good for writing big projects, because then for each of those rows on the spreadsheet, I could have it's kind of like an individual document, which I could just take one at a time. Basically, I broke it down into like 150 smaller chunks, and then it became reasonably easy. I didn't have to write them in order, because I kind of thought I should start at the beginning and work all the way through to the end. But I found that really difficult because I didn't quite know where to start, and I kind of got stuck in that. once I did that and broke it down into like 150 smaller parts, and I had all of those files sitting there on my computer, I could just go into any one of them and start writing that day. Once I did that, it became a lot easier. So I wrote the whole story of what we did in the campaign. And my friend Steve Colgan, who's one of the QI elves who writes the script for QI, he wrote chapters around like, what did the women do at Bletchley Park? What's the history of Bletchley Park? Who worked at Bletchley Park? What's the American involvement at Bletchley Park? So he wrote all of the chapters like that. And then to put the book together, we kind of interspersed my chapters of what we did in the campaign with Steve's chapters of like the history and what the women did. And so if you read through the book, it's kind of like half and half. You get one chapter on the campaign, then you get one on the history, and then kind of like you go through all the way to the end of the book. And yeah, it was once I got Steve involved again, that kind of spurred me on to get it finished. I can't remember how long it actually took. A lot longer than I expected at the beginning, but I think the main lesson I learned from that was when you've got a big thing that you need to do, break it down into smaller parts. It just makes it so much easier.
See, Professor Black tell you the same thing I tell you all the time. You want to write your story, do your homework, dot points, and then make them bigger as we go through, right? It's the best way to do it. See, Professor Black's backing me up. I quite like the layout of your book, by the way, Professor, the way that it does that through the history and then the history and the campaign. And it's sort of like, it ties it all together. It weaves the story together about how it was back in the day and how you needed to keep it back, like bring it back online so that everybody could appreciate that thing and the thing that happened there that was so great. You've got a really good question about that, actually. Do you want to ask your second question here, man? Because that's quite important.
Why is the Enigma code so famous?
Yeah, well, so Enigma machines were those machines that look like typewriters, and they were used by the German army to send messages to each other. So like in the Second World War, the German army were in trenches fighting us, the English. And for them to get messages across to other trenches, to their commanders, for all of those kind of like groups of soldiers to talk to each other, they all had Enigma machines. So there were hundreds of these machines which were used to send those messages. And I think actually it's really famous mainly because there's been a book and a film called Enigma. I think that's really helped because there were various different encoding machines and code breaking machines, but Enigma seems to be the one that everyone's picked up on, and maybe because Enigma is such a good name, I don't know.
Catchy branding. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I think it was Enigma, really, that was the turning point for us, wasn't it, for the Allies in the war too, was once we broke Enigma and we could get through a lot of the German sort of high level code, we could sort of start to unravel a lot of their plans a lot closer to home, and that sort of helped us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
quite a bit.
Yeah, there were several kind of moments during the war, and one of the things that was really amazing for me was during the campaign was to get to know some of the code breakers, so who were mainly kind of in their 80s and 90s by that time, and become friends with them. So, you know, that's been a massively wonderful thing that's kind of happened to me in my life, is to actually become friends with some of the code breakers that worked at Bletchley Park. And unfortunately, all the ones that I knew really well have unfortunately died since then, but that was incredible. And to kind of hear them talking about what it was actually like working there at the time. And the one that we got to know the best was Captain Jerry Roberts and his family. And I remember him talking about how in 1941 like we thought in the UK that we were definitely going to lose the war. And it was only because of, you know, some brave people and some kind of like amazing work that we didn't actually. And one of the major challenges throughout the war was when we were actually breaking the codes, was to make sure that the other side, that the Germans didn't know that we were breaking the codes, because, you know, we're getting all this information, but we don't want the other side to know that we know what they're doing, that we're reading their messages. So we had to do all sorts of things to try and cover up the fact that we actually were reading their messages, and to try and kind of make out to the other side that that we were getting it through some other kind of means. So there's lots of great books by oh goodness, I've forgotten his name now. Oh dear. I'll think of it and I'll let you know.
One of those things, it'll come back. Yeah, it's something I know.
Yeah. He wrote Agent Zigzag, and I've got it on my shelf. I could go and get it in a minute. But oh dear, I hate it when that happens. But yeah, so there's loads of great books about what actually happened. Yeah, Agent Zigzag is my favorite book. So so find that book if you're interested, about an amazing guy called Eddie Chapman, who was like a bank robber in London and ended up being like a triple agent for the UK. It's just an incredible story.
Sounds good. Should we read that at bedtime sometime? Agent Zigzag, you love a spy story, don't you? Yeah, we'll have a look at that book. That sounds great. That's a good recommendation.
Yeah, it's really great.
It's interesting to think that all of these people who were working at Bletchley throughout the war, and like all the obfuscation that was going on, and some of them were very, very young people, right? Like you say, some people in their teens doing this like critical work to try and effectively save the world as they saw it. Like that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know you personally came to computer science quite late in your life compared to the way most people do these days. Like people like Zach's age, sort of like 8 and 9, are taking on computer science with an idea to being programmers, but you came to it quite late. What was it that caused your shift towards computer science?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so yeah, I left home and left school at 16, and kind of like moved away and was working from the age of 16. Well, 14 really. I was working at weekends. So, and I didn't do that well at school. I got 5 O levels, so like 5 GCSEs, all grade C, so very consistent. and I kind of I wanted to do A levels, but my home life was not great. So I left school and started working. So I didn't really go back into education until I was about 26, so like 10 years later. And by that time, I had 3 children. I was divorced, and I was, trying to work out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, I suppose, really. And I wanted to get an education really so that I could earn more money to look after my kids, really. And I was a single parent back then. So I went along to the local college, and maths had always been my favourite subject at school. So I was looking for a maths course. So I did a maths course, and at the like in the last term of that, we did some programming in BASIC. And I kind of didn't quite totally understand everything that was going on, but I felt very intrigued by it and really enjoyed programming in BASIC. And so at the end of my course, I was going to go on to university. I had to decide, do I want to do maths or do I want to do computing? And I just thought, it's the same as I think now, technology is the future, right? And it's just become more so. That was 1989, so it's quite a while ago now. But I still feel the same way. I just find technology so exciting because it just enables us to do so many things. It's just incredible. So I decided to do a degree in computing, which I did, and then went on and did a PhD in software engineering, and then became an academic, a lecturer in computing at South Bank Uni in London. And that's over 20 years ago now.
And now you're at Durham University, which is like one of the world leaders in technology and stuff. They do amazing things up at Durham.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're in the top, can't remember how many universities in the UK, well, the top 5 maybe in the UK and the top 100 in the world. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're doing lots of exciting stuff up there. I'm really focusing a lot on, like you said earlier, I've done loads of stuff around gender and kind of like women in computing, because the numbers have stayed about the same since I've been involved. So since I kind of realized I was a woman in computing was probably like 20 something years ago. And I think the number of women in computing then was about 17%, and it's still about 17% now. But I think things are getting better in that we've got conferences for women in computing. You can kind of say women in computing or women in tech is a thing now, where it wasn't really a thing back then. And we've got some great pioneers in this country. Like, I don't know if you know Dame Steve Shirley, who was an amazing pioneer for computing and for women in computing back in the 1970s. She ran a company, she set up a company called F International, which had mainly women and mainly mums working from home, coding, writing software. And so they wrote the software for the Concorde black box flight recorder. And that was mainly women working from home, creating that. And she really wanted to, at that time, was so like Dame Stephanie's kind of like the generation above me, I guess, in those times, in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, when women got married, they had to leave work, which seems crazy now, but that's how it was back then. So when she got married, she was working as a software developer. She had to leave work, so she just set up her own consultancy and grew that into a massive, really successful software company, which I think she sold in the 1970s for something like 150 million pounds, which is a lot now, but it was even more back then. And she was, an absolute pioneer, and now is a major philanthropist. She gives money away to lots of good causes, and she's a real role model, I think, for women and for anyone in technology in the UK. But I just think, unfortunately, like if we talk about people, like well-known people in tech in the UK, we talk about Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, but we should all have known for a long time about people like Dame Stephanie Shirley, Steve Shirley, but for some reason we don't. So we need to do something about that still, I think.
Yeah. And so was that where the impetus for like tech mums and
Tech
BCS
mums
women came from?
So BCS Women came about because, when I was doing my PhD supervisor said to me, when you go to conferences, you need to network, you've got to talk to people. I was quite shy, so it's not really the sort of thing that I wanted to do. So I was quite scared of networking. And so went to the first academic conference. It was probably about 90% guys and about 10% women, but I didn't think about that at all. I hadn't even sort of thought about the fact that I'm a woman in technology. I was like a PhD student in software engineering. And so I went to this conference and tried to chat to people and just found it really, really difficult. And then went to a conference in Brussels that was a Women in Science conference, and just had such a different experience. And I kind of walked into that conference thinking, oh no, I've got to talk to people. I'm not very good at it. And walked into the conference, and somehow when the conference was nearly 100% women, it was just so much easier to talk to people. And I think it kind of helped me to realize that if you're in the majority, wherever you are, if you're in the majority, life is just easier in some ways. And you don't quite realize it maybe until you've been in a minority situation and a majority situation, and you realize kind of like what the difference is between those two. And so that was a real eye-opening kind of moment for me. And so I came back from that conference actually and set up BCS Women, so the British Computer Society's Women's Network. So that was in 1998, and it's still going now. And it kind of helped me to realize that there are particular groups of people that will find things more difficult for some reason because they're in a minority. And so that's kind of led to me setting up Tech Mums about 8 years ago now. So teaching kind of a broad range of tech skills to mums, particularly mums in disadvantaged areas, to help them understand kind of like what's out there in the world, what the opportunities are for them, and also to build confidence of working with tech in some way. And more recently, Tech Up Women, a program we've run with 4 universities and 15 industry partners from Durham University, which is putting together a program focused on women from underrepresented and underserved groups, training them into a technology career. So working with industry partners to find out what sort of jobs they need to employ women into. So things like software developer, data scientist, and then putting together a program to take 100 women through a program into a technology career. So, I'm just really keen to get as many women as possible into tech.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I mean, it's obvious from the things that you've been saying, but would you then agree that it's really important to be proactive in minority spaces in technology, like building spaces specifically for these minorities to go get that democratization happening in those niche areas?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I just think if you're in any sort of minority group, if you then have the experience of being in a majority, it's just so great. It just really, really is. And so what we really wanted to do with Tech Up Women was to create a space where women of color were in the majority, which we just about managed to do. I think we had 54% women of color, because I just that I really learned that lesson when I went to that conference in Brussels. Like if most people at the conference were women and I was a woman, somehow it just makes it easier. And so I wanted women of color to have that same kind of experience, if possible, in tech in our group. And I think, yeah, absolutely, for any minority group, you don't need to have that all the time, but it's nice to have that space as well as, you know, the kind of like everyday groups that you're in.
Mm. I mean, we're sort of running out of time a little bit, and I could talk to you all day, I would swear. But I mean, I guess one last question that I'd really like you to answer before you go is that what advice would you give to those people who are finding themselves in the minority in the tech space? How could you help them overcome the sort of feelings that they've got or the difficulties that they're facing, and maybe create something for themselves?
Well, I think find other people that think the same way that you do about what you want to do. So, for example, you know, just recently, some of my one of my friends was a founder of the Black Leaders Network. You know, as a response to what's been happening around the world with Black Lives Matter. And I think, you know, that's such a great idea, is to come up with a Black Leaders Network so that Black leaders can come together and work together and decide what they want to do. And, you know, and then, so I'm an ally in that group, and, you know, will do everything I can to support the group and champion it. But I think, you know, and I think that finding other people that care about the same things that you do, that you've got lots in common with, you know, that's, technology is so great at helping you to find those people, you know. And we didn't have that ability before social media, really, you know. So the internet was kind of like one step forward in helping to connect people that weren't in the kind of traditional hierarchies, or traditional kind of connected groups. So the internet was one step forward in being able to do that, and I think social media is another great step forward in being able to find other people that care about the same things as we do, or that we have lots in common with, so that we can kind of change the world to make it the place that we want it to be.
Amazing. Brilliant. Thank you for your time today, Professor Black. It's been really
You're very welcome.
and really intriguing to listen to you speak. It's we're definitely going to read that Agent Zigzag book at bedtime. I think that'll encourage Zach to do a bit more of his code breaking and programming.
Cool. I hope it's child friendly. I can't remember.
I'm sure it will be. It's all right. I'm pretty good at editing stuff on the fly
Okay,
when things are not child friendly, so that's okay. It's not a problem. I tend to be a few lines ahead of what I'm saying, so I can be like, okay, that's probably, I'll change a few words there. But it'll be all right. I'm sure it's no problem.
Great.
But yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on the stream today. And I understand you've got a coded message for Zach to break down for us when he builds his Caesar cipher today. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a message for Zach.
Oh, okay, so let's write that down. I'm going to quickly write it down. jmdr. Cool. All right, brilliant. Thanks again, Professor Black. It was
Thank
really,
you.
really great
Lovely
to
to
have
chat
you
to you. See you. Bye. Bye, Zach.
Bye.
Bye.
Amazing. That was so cool. That was super cool. I love talking to Professor Black. She's a very inspiring lady. She's done lots of really cool stuff for lots of minority people, which I think is really empowering. I think that's great. So Bletchley Park, you remember when there, right? Remember it was the museum and they talked about the code breakers and they had all the people that were sort of like bringing in all that information in one place and trying to decipher codes and crack through codes and all that sort of stuff. Are you ready to make a code breaking machine? Yeah, we can decipher Professor Black's message to us. Yeah? All right, cool. Let's have a look, shall we? So we've got our Scratch screen up, and you can get to this project here, everybody. There is a starter project that's already on Scratch for you. If you want to code along with us, you certainly can. If you just bring the Scratch project up, it's at rpf.io/dm-cypher, and you can open up the project there, and you can see that we've got this little wheel here on the screen. I think it's my mouse here. So we've got this little wheel here, which looks like a Caesar cipher, which is actually a very old form of code breaking. So Caesar ciphers are one of the oldest sort of forms of decoding messages that we know of. And why they call it Caesar cipher, do you know?
Because Caesar used to do it to write messages to other armies.
He did, right? So back in the day, before people knew about cryptography very much, we had clever old Caesar who used to write any of his messages for his military troops and things like that. He used to have his own Caesar cipher. And so the story goes that Caesar only ever used to use a key of 3 in his Caesar cipher messages. He never used to change his key. He always used the same key, right? Because back then, I figure, if you were writing codes, most of the people who were going to attempt to read your codes probably couldn't read, right? So they were going to have trouble there. And the fact that he was probably one of the first people to ever use one of these organized ciphers in order to sort of change his messages up and make them hard to read meant that nobody really understood what he was doing. They probably would have looked at it and thought, oh, this is probably in Aramaic or some language I don't understand, so that's no good to me, tear it up and throw it away. Well, they'd try and find somebody that spoke that language, but the language didn't exist because it was still their language. It was still Latin, but it had just been like ciphered across 3 letters. Clever dude, right? Caesar was clever. That's why he was Caesar. So we've got our project here. So we're going to start from scratch, Zach. Are you ready?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll pass over to you, man, and you can drive, because it's not a complicated project, but it's better if you drive than I drive. So bring it across that screen. That's cool. So the first thing we want to do is, what do we always do when our projects start? When green flag clicked.
Yeah.
My man, that's it. Let's drag it across. Okay, so what we've got is our when green flag clicked, and we want to make sure that both of our cipher wheels are always one dead on top of the other. So how would we make our cipher wheels go to the center of our workspace? Every time we click green flag, we want them to go bang, straight to the center of our workspace. So how do we get them to go to the center? Yep. And then we want to go to, not random position, that would be weird. Yep, awesome, that's the one. Clip it across. So as soon as we click the green flag, we want to make sure both of our cipher wheels are bang, one on top of the other in the middle of our screen. We're on our way. The other thing we want it to do is make sure that it sets up in exactly the same way every time. So grab a point in direction block and have it point in direction 90. Cool. So we know that when we have a Caesar cipher, right, we're moving the letters of our alphabet a couple of spaces across, yeah? Do you remember what we call that number that we use to move the thing across? What do we call it? Do you remember? What's our cipher something? It's our thing you use to unlock the door.
Key.
A key. Fantastic. So let's grab a sensing block, and we want it to ask us a question. We want it to ask and wait, but we don't want it to ask what's your name. We want it to ask what is the key. So drag your ask block across. That's it. Clip it underneath and change that sentence to what's your key, or what is the key. Up to you how you type it in. You know, the other thing Caesar used to do with his codes and stuff. I mean, you keep typing, that's fine. I'll just tell you the story. So Caesar was also known for tattooing his secret messages into the scalps of his slaves. You know this? And then he used to let their hair grow back, right? And then he'd send the slave off, go on, buddy, go take that message to Zach. And the slave would go toddling off across. And if anyone caught him, he wasn't carrying a message. But when he got to the other end, the guy would know to shave all his hair off, and he could read the message on the back of his head. What do you think he did with his slaves after he coded the message on their heads? Do you reckon he like tattooed over it and did it again? He scribbled it all out and had another tattoo somewhere else? Maybe he retired them. Maybe they went to live on a nice farm up north where it was always sunny. Who knows? All right. So now that we're asking what our key is, we need it to store that key somewhere. It's going to ask us what's your key, so we need to store it in our what? A variable. So let's make a new variable.
Yep.
And we'll call it, oh, we've already got our variables in this project. Look at that. Planning ahead. We've already got our key variable. So since we've got our variables already set up, the thing we need to do with it is we want to set the key. So right now it says set angle. So drag that across and make it say set key once you get it in there. That's it. Set key. Yeah. Set key to answer. So that's under your sensing blocks again. So it's going to ask you, what is your key? You're going to type it in and it's going to save that. So sensing, and you'll see a little round bubble called answer. That's the one. Down a little bit, plug it into set key to. That's the one. So it's going to ask, what is your key? And then it's going to wait. You're going to type in a number for whatever your key is, okay? And then it's going to save that as our variable. And it's going to use that in our code a little bit further, okay? So we've also got another variable called angle. So grab that one. So go to your variables, and we want set angle to. So we're going to drag that one across, set angle to. Cool. Set to, yep. And then we're going to need an operator block. So on your green menu. So we're going to set our angle to something divided by something else. Okay, we're going to take, how many degrees are there in a circle?
360.
Awesome. And how many letters are there in the alphabet?
26.
So if you see our circle over here, you can think that there are 360 degrees over 26 letters. So we want 360 divided by 26. So grab your divided block and plug it into the angle block. That's the one, a little slash. That's it. Plug it into angle. And the two numbers are 360 and 26. Awesome. So far, when we click the green flag, what happens to our project?
It will ask us for like a number.
Yep, it'll ask us for a number, which we type in, and then what does it do with our number?
It saves it.
It saves it, and then it sets our angle to each one of those letters on our little dial. That's fantastic. And so now when we have our key, what is the key actually? What is it?
Like a number.
Yeah, but what does it do? So what are we actually thinking about? Because it takes our letter A and it moves it, doesn't it? How many places?
The number you put in.
Yeah, right on. So what we want it to do now is we want it to repeat that number of times, because we've got each of these letters, it's going to turn that dial the number of letters that we tell it. So whatever key is, it's going to turn it that many letters. So grab a repeat block. Repeat, that's one, plug it in at the end. And then you're going to need your key variable. So it's saved your key, okay, and we're going to use it now to repeat that many times. Cool, so it's going to repeat the number of letters that you tell it to. So now we want it to do a motion. We want it to turn a certain number of degrees this way, so clockwise. Yep. And then in that little hole there, put your angle variable. You see a little round one for angle. Awesome. So it's going to repeat the number of times you tell it, how many letters, and it's going to turn that many letters as it goes. And now grab a weight block in, because it makes it look cooler if we have a little bit in the middle. It looks like someone's actually turning the dial, which I like. So grab a weight, pop it in underneath the angle degrees inside your repeat loop, and change that number to like 0.2. Something a little small. 0.2 seconds. Cool. And so now what we've got is it's going to ask us for our key, and then it's going to see if it would turn our thing. So let's test our code at this point. So click the green flag. What is your key? Pick a number. We're just for testing at the moment. 12, hit enter. We should see our thing. There we go. So it starts rotating 12. Nice. Working. Boosh. So what we'll do as well is let's pop a bit in there so that we can reset it back to 0, yeah? So go to your control blocks and grab a wait until block. It's towards the bottom. That's it. That's it. Perfect. And then in that little hole, go to sensing and grab key space pressed. We use the space bar to reset our cipher. Key space press. And now it's going to do all those things. It's going to turn your cipher, and then it's going to wait until you press the space key. So what you can do now is you can grab your repeat key, just duplicate that from repeat key. Yep, duplicate it. Clip it to the bottom. Get rid of your wait until bit off the very bottom. We don't need that anymore. Now what we want to do is the only thing we need to change is your turn block. We want it to turn the opposite direction. So unplug that a little bit. Yep, pull angle out. Going to use that in a sec. Pull that block out. Pop your weight back in. Great. And now grab another turn block, but we want it to turn anti-clockwise this time. So we're going to turn it back the way it came. And then plug angle back in.
Yeah.
So now when you press spacebar, it should turn back. So
it's supposed to be the other way round.
Oh, it can be. It doesn't particularly matter, but yeah, because it's going to do the one after the other, and it's going to do it key number of times. But yeah, that's fine. So if you click the green flag again now. Turn, and then when you push space, it should turn it all the way back. I'll do it now. It goes back the way it came. Nice. I like it. So what we can do now is tell you what, let's get rid of our headphones because we're not talking to Professor Black anymore. So let's get rid of them. So what we can do now is we need to do the other sprite. So click on your other sprite, the other wheel, the internal wheel. Cool. And then we want to make sure with this one doesn't really turn much, right? It stays where it is and the other wheel turns. So we want to make sure that they both line up when they start. So with your other sprite, what did we tell it to do first? When green flag clicked, we told it to go to the dead center of our screen. So events, when green flag clicked, and then go to the dead center. So 0, 0, that's the one. Cool. And then we also want it to point in the same direction. So we want it to point in direction 90, just so that we know they're both lined up. So when you click the green flag now, bosh, it will ask you for your key. Give it your key. Hit enter. We see it turn, wait for it to finish spinning. And we hit space, and it should spin all the way back and reset itself to an A to A. A 0 shift cipher. Pow. Oh man. Now tell you what, should we add another bit that will make it easier for you to read when you decipher your message? We can actually turn the entire cipher so the letter you want is at the bottom. Should we add one of those? Yeah. So on this one here, let's get a when right arrow and when left arrow key pressed. Get those ones. They're in our events menu, aren't they? When, that's it. We want a left arrow and a right arrow. So drag them in, change the drop down menu. Right arrow and a left arrow. Cool. And then what you want to do is grab another turn block from your motion. So we want it to turn. Yep, so that one can go under right arrow, and the other one can go under left arrow, turn the opposite direction. Then grab an operator. We want another divide operator. And we want, what were the two numbers we used last time? Do you remember?
360 and 26.
Perfect. So pop that into either one of those holes because we're going to dupe it in a second. So 360 and 26. Cool. And then you can just duplicate your operator block and plug it in. Or you don't want the whole thing, you just want the operator.
No,
That's okay, just take it out. Just take the operator out of there. Great, get rid of the old bin one, that's it, bin that. So now these two here, we need to make sure that both of the wheels turn the same. So how do we get this code onto our other sprite without having to make the whole code again? That's right, we drag and wait for the wiggle, there it is. And then the left arrow one, and wait for the wiggle, there it is. So check it to make sure it's there. Clean up your blocks. I know you love doing a bit of a block cleanup. Let's check, and they're all there. So now when you push the left and right arrow, it should turn the entire cipher wheel by one letter. So now you can work out which letter you want on your cipher. Yeah? Nice. So if you click the green flag, it should spin all the way back to AA. All right, it automatically does it for us. And then it asks us for our what our key is. So let's go back to our message. The key is 18. Okay, and our cipher text, do you know what it was? SYWFL. I've got a good memory like this. RJMDR.
Whoa.
That's right. So I'm the boss around here. So we've got our cipher text there. SYWFLRJMDR. Told you. Yeah, you act surprised. And our key is 18. So in here, let's pop our key of 18. Bang. And it starts making our cipher for us. So it's going to work out where we're at. Okay, so what we're looking for is we want to have on the inside ring, we want to have our first coded letter, which is
S.
So turn your cipher until the S is the one that's closest to us. So there's S. It's coming around. Keep it coming around until it's at the bottom. No, we want the inside circle S.
Oh.
Inside circle. So keep turning it. It's coming around. There it is. Keep going. So what's the letter that it actually should be? I'll write for you.
A.
A. Okay, so now turn your cipher until the Y is at the bottom. Inside circle, we want Y at the bottom on the inside circle. That's it, keep going, keep going. What's our next letter?
G.
G. The next letter we need is W. Find W.
E.
E. F. Now we're looking for F. Here we go, it's coming around. The letter, what are we looking for?
N.
N. Okay, now we're looking for L. So let's find L.
T.
T. Okay, now we have a space. Now we need the letter R. So find R on the inside of your cipher. Z. Oh, look, we're getting our message starting to come out. We've got another space. Now the letter we're looking for is J. So let's spin it around until we get to J. Bring our J around to the bottom. Oh, there it is. Cross one more. What's the letter we're looking for?
R.
R. Now we want the letter M.
U.
U. D. We're almost there. Keep it coming around until D gets to the bottom. Yeah, keep going. You're almost there. Other direction. That's it.
It's confusing because like one key makes it go that way and the other makes it L.
L. Yeah, and then R. So we're looking for another R.
Z.
Z. So what does our secret message say?
Agent Z rules.
Agent Z rules. Oh man, well done. Deciphered. I love it. So that's cool. That's a Caesar cipher, right? That's how we make a Caesar cipher in Scratch. That's pretty cool, eh? Yeah. So now that we've done a Caesar cipher, I'll take you downstairs and I'll teach you how to make a Visionaire cipher.
Wait, what's that?
So that's like a whole other level of complicated, man. So like whereas a Caesar cipher, right? So you only take one key for a Caesar cipher. Using a Visionaire cipher, you have a key word. So it changes the letters by the letters,
So
right?
basically, you're trying to make a sentence.
Well, you can make a sentence with a Caesar cipher too, but it's much easier to break, right? So a Caesar cipher can be broken if you do things like frequency analysis, right? So if you know it's in English, Do you know the most common letter used in English? What letter is used the most in the English language, you reckon?
I was about to say A.
Whoa, close. Not bad. It's definitely a vowel.
U. No.
No. What do you reckon? Have another guess, and then I'll tell you.
C.
No, that's not a vowel, man.
Oh, yeah.
E. E is the most commonly used letter
Wait,
in
is
English, right? Yeah, for real. So if you write a message, if someone wants to do frequency analysis on your writing, they can do that by looking at it and seeing what letter shows up the most in your ciphered writing, and then they can pretty much assume that's E, right? And once they've got that, they can work out how you change the alphabet, and they can decode your message with their own cipher. Vigenère cipher adds another layer of complex. So instead of having just one key, you have a repeating key, which is a word. But if you make your key the same length as your whole message, it's unbreakable. Right? We can do those on paper. I can show you how to do that on paper. Some fun? Cool. All right, so we'll go do that. But let's say goodbye to everybody first. All right. So we'll just remind everyone that you can share your work with us and stuff at rpf.io/home. We love to see the things that you're doing. Remember, there's a video on there this week with myself, Agent 3.14, Christina, and Agent X, where we decode some messages using Scratch as well. We do a slightly more complicated Caesar cipher than this one. We get the computer to actually spit out the coded message for us at the end. We don't have to decode it ourselves. And you can also do the free Raspberry Pi cryptography course at rpf.io/crypto course. So that was designed by a very good friend of mine, Mac. Really cool course, really interesting way to get involved in a bit of crypto if you're interested in that sort of thing. Really easy to do, beginner's opening course on it, like introducing you to those sort of concepts and ways that machines use crypto in your life, because it's actually everywhere. Cryptography is everywhere in your life, man. Your tablet filled with cryptography. Every message you send on Skype or on WhatsApp, cryptoed all the way up to the hilt, right? But we'll talk about that when we get downstairs. Should we head off?
Yeah.
All right, let's say goodbye to everyone. Catch you later, everybody. We'll see you next week on the next live stream. Keep making awesome stuff and share it with us at rpf.io/home.